next edition of the Fire Up series of conversations with startup founders and investors. It's a knowledge sharing series. So thanks, Vinit. So today we are discussing the whole space of media tech. I mean, it's a nice fancy term, and lately it's been getting a lot of attention in the recent years, and so nice that your startup Plop Stories is doing so well as well. So great to have you here. So just to kind of set the stage, Vinit, can you just introduce Laidbear in terms of what is media tech? What all does it comprise when we talk about media tech?
Okay, so media tech is I mean it's a broad topic, a broad segment. You can include I mean media and entertainment kind of falls under the same domain. So primarily you have the OTT players. I mean in terms of players which are already existing, you can consider Netflix as a media tech player. Someone like, let's say, an Amazon Kindle, because they deal with books, so that could also fall under media tech. So all of these over-the-top services, OTT services, and all are included as part of media tech. Gaming is another segment which can be included under media tech. Although I mean it's a separate segment in itself. It's a huge segment. Yeah, these are. I mean I mean the problem is these days the lines are very blurry, right? With the you know, blockchain and all of these things coming in. So you have financial aspects as well as media tech kind of combining into one. I think it's a great period to be in, because you're seeing so many revolutions happening at the same time. Especially, I mean, this is almost, I mean, in my mind, it is almost similar to the internet revolution that happened in the 1990s. So similar to that, I mean, you're seeing that shift, and you wouldn't have imagined media tech, financial startups, all of these things at that point of time. And today, I mean, these are general terms that people use. So I think that's the shift that is happening at this point of time.
True. I think at some level, like anything that helps in some form, any kind of content get to consumers, right?
Yeah.
Content could be sports content, could be news, could be games, could be anything, right?
Absolutely.
You're right. Games in itself is a separate category.
Correct.
And which is why sports direct to consumers is also a segment considered to be a part of media tech today. Sports tech itself is a much larger space.
Absolutely. Again, sports is a huge segment, multi-billion-dollar, huge segment. So, I mean, it's very easy to classify. Like, for example, fintech. Fintech is pretty, you know, although it has multiple domains, it still can be, separated out from others because it deals primarily with finance, which it's easier to imagine that. But media tech is a complete, giant in itself.
So now coming to, I mean, who would have thought some years back that storytelling itself would be a segment where there will be interesting startup models coming up. And lately I've seen quite a few startups come up in the space. And can you just quickly talk about Plop Stories? I mean, what is it that you do at Plop?
Sure. So Plop is primarily a mobile-only application. So basically, it's a new format of storytelling. So we are including interactive and immersive elements within stories to make the entire storytelling experience more interesting. Storytelling as well as reading experience more interesting. So our basic hypothesis was that there has not been a lot of innovation if you see in the digital, literature space. So initially you had these hardbound books, and those books got digitally converted into a EPUB format, which is basically Kindle and all of those things. So it's just conversion of format more than anything else. And then, recently, last 10 years, we've seen kind of audio based content also kind of pick up. So in terms of podcasts or audio books and all of these things. So, there, I mean, again, it is just conversion from a text-based content format into an audio-based content format. So there's, in terms of innovation, if you look at fintech, if you look at edutech, all of these things, I mean, there has been immense level of, innovation that has happened there. Literature, if you see, it's an age-old, domain. So, and yet there has not been a lot of innovation there. So we thought, how do we make it more interesting? How do we include more, interactive elements? So for example, use of audiovisual components within storytelling experience itself to broaden the, broaden the people that we can approach. So to broaden the target audience. So especially because you can imagine, right? These days people are no longer reading content, especially fiction content is kind of declining. Non-fiction, of course, is increasing, but people are not picking up books. People are probably watching videos and all of these things. But so we have to innovate, and we have to probably make it more interesting for people to actually pick up a book and read it. So that's what we are attempting to do at Plop Stories.
No, so true. I mean, actually, storytelling hasn't changed much. I mean, we haven't made this highly interactive medium. So even something as simple as like collective watching of content, right? Could be a sport, a game. Even that is just emerging, and still, I don't think we've harnessed the power. Sorry, you're going to say something.
Yeah, when you mentioned that, I just thought of a couple of features within Plop Stories. I mean, it's going down to a feature level, but then this kind of gives you an idea of what kind of innovation that you can think of when storytelling is concerned. So, for example, within Plop, let's say you're reading a content piece and it's a dating sequence, right? You're going for a date, a romantic date, and while you're going to a restaurant, you can hear the sound of the cutlery in the background. So that enhances, especially music and sound. It has so much impact on the way. It could be the same content, but if you have different music pieces put behind it, the mood kind of changes, right? So we are experimenting with sound. We are experimenting video content as well. So we are experimenting with a lot of interactive elements. So for example, let's say it's a kidnapping sequence within a book. So instead of just writing that the kidnapper called you and he asked for, let's say, 2 million ransom, you actually get a call from the kidnapper, and your phone turns into a call screen, and you can actually pick up the call or reject the call. And based on the decision that you take, the story kind of moves in a different direction. And if you actually pick up the call, you can hear the person on the other side actually talking to you. So again, this is not very high tech. I mean, to be very honest, of course, there are technology elements involved, but it's not as high tech as, let's say, a blockchain or an AI. So we have to get there in terms of AR, VR. Again, we want to kind of incorporate those elements as well. But even these small changes, we have seen kind of, customers getting engaged, users getting interested in this storytelling experience itself. So that's...
I can imagine if I'm reading a horror story and I get a call from the person.
Absolutely. And we have one of the stories where you get a call, and it's one of the sample stories, one of the free stories. And you can see the reviews there. I mean, when somebody gets that call, it's like insane. And
it is spooky.
yeah, absolutely. And I've seen reactions firsthand, right? When I meet someone, I explain them the product, they generally download the app. And romance and horror are typically the best-selling ones in this category. So typically people choose, let's say, that horror story. And as soon as they, click 3 times and then the call comes up, they're like, boss, what is happening? You have hacked my phone. So I have to tell them, no, just pick up the call. So, it's those kind of immersive effects that we are going for. Even Netflix, for example, had tried it out with their Bandersnatch series. So where you had to take decisions within the story itself, and the video kind of moved into a different direction based on the story. So, even the big giants are kind of reimagining how storytelling is going to evolve in the future.
No, there was this movie long back, Kamal Haasan had made many years back in Tamil, where the whole movie is from 2 leading protagonists' point of view.
Okay.
Both are in the first half, when one is narrating, it seems that the other one is a bad one. Second half, the sequence is now viewed from the other person's point of view.
Correct.
And very interesting premise. Now, one of our startups, Dreamview, has a 360-degree camera. So when they were starting, it's a startup that came out of research. In the early days, when they're trying to figure out still, like they say, finding the golden nail, you have a hammer, what nail can you bang? They were trying to do different things. One of the things they said was, can we make movies using 360-degree cameras? So where, if I am viewing the movie, I can choose what point of view I want. I can turn around.
Absolutely.
When the character is saying something in front, I can move and see what the other character is doing on the side, or I can turn around. I can choose what I want to view. Just the point of view is fixed, point of reference, but I can choose which view I want. It was a very interesting premise, but of course they never went that route. They saw a lot of possibilities around the autonomous vehicles and some other.
So I understand why they probably would not have gone. There are bandwidth issues as of now, especially in AR, VR, and that is one of the reasons why we have yet not explored AR VR. I mean, we are right now at a place where we are innovating on these smaller aspects, and then once we get, let's say, currently we have close to 700 stories on the platform. So once we get to a level where AR VR becomes mainstream, so especially with 5G coming into play, right? The data transmission rates are as high as 100 MB per second, and that's the average rate. At a peak rate, you go as high as 2 GB per second, which is insane. I mean, 2 GB per second is like a Blu-ray movie downloaded within a second. So and for these kind of experiences, I mean, these 360-degree experiences and all, typically the video, let's say a short 30-minute video will also be like 16 GB in size, 16 to 32 GB in size, and that too at a lower quality. So I mean, right now, I think we are at a stage, once 5G comes into mainstream, I mean, it kind of is implemented in a mainstream way. I think all of these technologies will also kind of start emerging, especially AR VR. I think AR VR has been spoken about since a very long time. I think it has been around 7 to 8 years now since AR VR is a hot topic. But I mean, you don't see it. I mean, around the same time, blockchain also came, and today you see the use case of blockchain, and blockchain is gone. I mean, it's almost $1 trillion industry now. So I mean, AR VR is again one of those technologies. I think we have to wait for the 5G thing to just come in, and then you will see like a boom happening, and especially in media tech. I mean, the use cases in media tech for AR VR are immense.
Yes. So now on one side, like OTT has become very pervasive today, but you're right. I mean, it hasn't found its way much in the mobile yet, because it still based the same content. There's no much change in format. But what are the other trends? Because OTT is now here to stay. Now, what are some of the trends we can expect in OTT, say in the next coming years?
So I mean, yeah. So broadly, I mean, I'll come to the broad things, but I think at a very narrow, if you talk about specific pointers, then I think I mean, we are already seeing that happening, bundling of services. So let's say Airtel bundling up with Netflix, or I think Jio is bundled up with Hotstar. So you take a Jio subscription, which is priced slightly higher than their normal monthly fee. You get the Hotstar subscription also as well. So I mean, it's a simple use case. I think it's very. I mean, even if I were to offer you, and especially because there are so many, OTT players coming up in the market. You have Netflix, now you have Disney coming up with their own thing, Hotstar, Jio is coming up with its own thing. I mean, there is Z, there is Alt Balaji in the Indian space, and these again cater to an urban audience. So you have others like Stage catering to a very so the third tier city kind of a audience, to second tier to third tier audience. So I mean, there are so many services coming up, and the problem is, I think today the problem is, I mean, how many subscriptions do I keep? If I have to pay for everyone, then it will be very difficult. Especially, I mean, I want to watch Marvel, but then Netflix also produces great content, and then I also want to watch Game of Thrones. So I need an HBO, I need Disney, and then I need a Netflix also. So I think this bundling up services kind of helps, especially because India has a huge population. So let's say Airtel comes up with a, let's say a monthly extra, you pay like 500 rupees, you will get all three services, HBO, Netflix, and Prime, for example. I would take it. So I think there would be many people who would take it at a per unit cost. I mean, unit level, of course, it will be lesser for these guys, but then at an aggregate level, especially since the costs are fixed for these guys, and bandwidth costs are, I mean, negligible almost. So I think that's a great thing that we are already seeing, and we will probably see that happening more and more as time goes along. There's this other thing also. I mean, we are also experimenting with a couple of these trends: free versus subscription. Since we spoke about subscription services, a lot of free services also, YouTube and others in that category. For example, Hotstar has done it very well. So they have a free model and a paid premium model as well. So I think that is again something where it's moving in that direction. How do you introduce free and subscription as well, because subscription gives you a, I mean, there is I mean, I know exactly what will I earn next month, so I can put that money into production. So it becomes easy for me to predict my revenues. So, but of course, I mean, free channel gives me volumes. So that, I mean, that there's a dilemma there, and I think people are getting kind of hybrid models is what people are experimenting with. We have also done that with Plop. We started off with a pure subscription model, and today we have a free and subscription model. So you watch some ads for free, and then you get some coins. Again, when we talk about ads, you have privacy issues. Again, that's something that has come up.
You have enough teasers in the free version that pulls up the subscribers to the paid version.
So there are, okay, so that is one model where it's a freemium model. So typically, like, you give some content for free, and then because he likes the content, because he's involved in the content, he says, I'll now pay for it. And that's exactly what, like, for example, Netflix is also doing. 1 month they offer for free, and then you can go ahead and subscribe for them. There is this other model where they're saying, okay, you know what, you don't want to pay, okay, it's fine. You watch 10 ads in a day, I'll give you 100 coins. And then that you can use those 100 coins, which has an equivalent, let's say, rupee value or some dollar value. You can use those coins to actually consume premium content as well. So, this is mainly targeted towards a segment which is, 18 to 25 kind of a segment, which is, I mean, especially in the US. So India, of course, everybody wants free. So I think it's broader, but I think 25 to 35 people are willing to pay if they find the service to be good. But 18 to 25, where there are, I mean, you will find a lot of free people having a lot of free time to consume these kind of content pieces. It's a great way to bring them on board. And then once what happens is then they're hooked on to the channel. And as soon as they turn 25, I mean, they start going to a job, they start earning. They're like, I'll just pay off, right? I mean, $5, $10 a month is a very small amount. So why should I watch 10 ads in a day? Let me get full access.
True. Now, just on the other aspect, I mean, especially given the mobile and OTT, it's a very accessible group of consumers. Now, this whole co-viewing and social viewing, why hasn't that taken off as much? Where there is, like, I know, like, Facebook has watch parties and there are many other available, but it's not very popular yet. So what do you think are the challenges in that? Why is it not as popular as it could have been?
I mean, I find a very interesting dichotomy there, because I mean, it's somewhat popular in the West. Before I jump onto my next segment, I mean, this thing, it's kind of picking up in the West. So even for that matter, which is that app which became really famous, the audio one, Clubhouse. That's almost on the same concept, right? I mean, somebody is given a mic and then they kind of speak up for that particular time. So time sensitive. So watch parties, I mean, the reason why you went into an OTT thing from a TV thing is because somebody has free time from 10 to 11. Somebody has free time from 7 to 8. So, I mean, so somebody can watch content. In fact, somebody who can watch content at 7 to 8, somebody can watch the same content at 10 to 11. So based on their availability, they can watch it. In fact, I mean, it's a surprising and another trend, very surprising, which I had not predicted, is the older generation getting into these content OTT pieces. I mean, today, my mom, dad don't watch any content on TV, which is very surprising. I mean, so I never thought they would be spending so much time on YouTube. Now they watch serials or whatever, I mean, whatever they want to watch on the mobile, on the specific apps. So again, there is a convenience of time. Whenever I'm free, I'm cooking and all, I don't want to spend that time. And then whenever I'm free, I can go and everybody can, individually watch whatever they want to watch. So, and that is the reason, I think one of the core reasons why OTT succeeded. And then again, you're getting back to a place where you're saying, let's make it into a TV. I'll stream a service at 5 o'clock and let everyone come and watch it. And of course, that has a use case. I'm not saying that does not have it, but it's a very small use case.
So it goes against the primary value of OTT.
Exactly. And that has a small use case, especially because I think the fatigue thing that has come up. I mean, I don't want to. If my friend selects a movie and all watch it together, then awesome. I mean, I don't want to spend time deciding which movie to watch. So that again, when there are other episodes, for example, Game of Thrones is a great example, right? You would want to watch it together with everyone because you don't want the suspense to be revealed at different times. So that, I mean, those specific use cases, I think has value. I mean, in terms of watch parties and all of those things. But generically, I don't think that, I mean, I don't think it has much value. And you can see that in terms of YouTube content creators as well, right? I mean, there are a lot of these guys who create live streams. Even this web stream, right? I mean, live, maybe only 50 people will come, but maybe on YouTube, thousands of people will watch. So that's the beauty of it. So there is a use case, but I don't think there is a major use case there. And again, this is my personal view.
It's also possible that, like, I mean, I don't see interesting models yet. I mean,
exactly.
Synchronized viewing, that's okay, but maybe there's a more creative models possible. Where it can be made more engaging, more immersive, more participative.
Correct. So, I mean, an interesting use case could be, I mean, one of the things that we were exploring, but I mean, we are not yet there, is to, so what happens is everybody watches, let's say, a part of the story, and by 5 o'clock today, everybody has to vote where the story will move to. And then based on that vote, that story will move in that direction. So that I mean, it's again not a watch party kind of scenario because everything is not live, but there's a time bound activity. Of course, you can go back at let's say 7 and watch the entire thing, but you no longer have the option to select. You no longer have the option to vote, for example. So that could be a scenario. Again, there are a couple of games in which people have introduced live concerts. So that's again an interesting use case where a music concert will happen within a Fortnite game, or a virtual event is happening somewhere, and people typically want to be part of that virtual event when that event happens. So that is again a use case that is there. But yeah, I mean,
like some years back, there was this thing. I don't know where it's gone. I haven't been tracking. I'm not big into sports, but I remember in US on a sports field, they will show ads on the field, on the baseball field or football field. They will show ads that are painted ads, the ads that are painted on the field. In the TV broadcast, it will change. It won't change. At the time, it was not changing. But come to think of it now, it can be very targeted. I mean, now OTT, if you're watching a game on OTT, I mean, the network knows every consumer. They know enough about the consumer. Now they can use the football field to have very targeted ads instead of having everybody seeing a digital ad. Now they can target it based on who's watching.
Correct.
But I don't think anybody has done that yet.
Yeah, it's I think a very small segue. I mean, it's a very easy thing to do, right? I mean, you're digitally putting up this thing, a piece there. I mean, you have to just change that piece. I think it has also to do with a lot of licensing requirements, because most of these ads are taken up by, let's say, a Byju's, which
I don't think enough has been invested in the social angle.
Yeah, absolutely.
Many things, targeting, personalization, OTT, the whole power of AI also for that matter.
Absolutely.
It hasn't been tapped beyond some simple recommendation. Not much has been done yet. And I'm sure the recommendation technology is probably like several years or maybe even 1 or 2 decades.
Recommendation is like the least interesting use case today.
Exactly. There's much more interesting possibilities. While on the topic of stories like news, I know some startups that have made news into like as interesting as because InShot focuses on news, but there are a few others that have gone beyond news, but a very news-ish aggregated content, but presented very interesting curation and algorithm-based curation. Where do you see that going? Because that's in some form related to what you do, though that is still news and happenings. Correct. But how do you see power of AI in such things? Curation. I mean, like one thing is targeting, but also very interesting curation of content, automatic algorithmic curation.
So, I mean, I think the application will be very similar, or the use case will be very similar to a recommendation engine, because eventually it will understand your geography, let's say, or what is the news that will matter to you the most. And so there are two types of things happening. One is, like you mentioned, there's an there's a push happening. So they have created a content, and then I have to watch that content irrespective of where I live. So for example, John Oliver, which is a very famous this thing in the Tonight Show, which happens in the US. So it's typically catered to a US audience, but then I enjoy watching it to just get the cultural nuances of US. So, but then that's one way. I mean, it's not really targeted to me, but anybody who wants to watch it can go ahead and watch it. But on the other hand, the recommendation engine itself picks up news relevant to me and kind of gives it to me. So that from an AI perspective, I think that is an interesting, again, a recommendation engine is like the least interesting, like I mentioned, it's the least interesting thing.
There's one that recently, they've been around for some time, but they recently pivoted. They're saying that they will create an animated story based on a narrative text. You just have a short story, and based on the short story, they'll create it as an animated AV story. Instead of what is simply text story, they'll convert that into a visual story. Yeah. And so they use a lot of templates because you can't, it's much easier
absolutely.
And actually realize it. So they use a lot of bounding frames to restrict what kind of video gets created, but that's their startup.
Yeah, you can use the same for news also. No? I mean, once those templates are ready, you can, I mean, instead of, I mean, you just put in what is the news, let's say, somebody's getting married or whatever. I mean, you can show virtual marriage happening, and that's how there is some context.
A visual story around it.
Yeah, and deep fakes. I mean, there's a bad this thing about deep fakes. You can actually use that deep fakes technology itself into these models.
Yes, we had one of our technologists, one of our professors work as lip sync technology. Right?
Okay.
Once you based on enough videos of the person speaking, it uses phonetic models and can modify the lips of the person to synchronize with the sound coming.
Yeah.
So PM's Mann Ki Baat was taken and in Hindi normally and was
converted into English.
Its own voice generated, synthesized, with his lips synchronized to Telugu.
Acha.
So Mann Ki Baat, the exact same thing. First thing, the Hindi text was translated to Telugu.
That's
and then
done.
Telugu, using again deep learning, his voice was used to synthesize sound in his voice, and then the lips were modified to synchronize with the sound.
Yeah.
It seems as though like PM Modi, his own voice is speaking in Telugu.
Correct.
Now, of course, it is taking deepfake to a different level. So that's why it's not publicized much because like the power of the technology is a little scary. But it got into one of the top conferences that work. So in fact, like one of the use cases we got was movie editing. Like when they're editing, they have to on the editing table, the director sometimes makes changes to the dialogue and such. When that happens, they have to go and do the whole reshoot, which is a huge affair.
Yeah.
So now they say it's a small change. Why not we use this technology to change it?
Absolutely.
Why only change the visuals and backgrounds and colors and tones and such? Can't we even change the actual lip movement? So they're very excited.
In 10 years' time, you will not even need to shoot it. I mean, this will automatically have. It'll take snippets from different videos.
In fact, one of our students took some work that was done in one of our labs, which is automatic editing. It's an AI deep learning solution that understands how editing happens. And like he took a short film. It was a 5-minute film that was edited by a algorithm. So learn from all the previous editing when the model was built. So give it the raw footage. It edits and creates your 5-minute short film.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think a lot of innovation is happening on that side. Sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
Very nascent still. The technology is very nascent.
Yeah. I mean, you will see all these things. I mean, being very. I think in 10 years' time, you will not even realize what are the technology solutions out there. I mean, even today, nobody understands blockchain, right? I mean, it's a very difficult thing to get your head into. And you can imagine the same thing happening to internet when in the 1990s. I mean, when internet just came out, the people will be clueless. Today, everybody knows about internet. So, I mean, when things become mainstream, I think these things will I think in the next 10 years, you will see these things happening, and you won't even realize 10 years back, these technologies were not there. In fact, if you think about it, internet itself is like 20 years. It's just been around 20 years. So it's not been long.
True.
And all these things that we're talking about is more on the output side, right? I mean, once you take a content piece, you edit it and then push it, or let's say an algorithmic thing and then you take it and then you push it. So most of that thing is happening on the output side, but a lot of research is happening on the input side, because I think that is the that is the output side. A lot of research has been done, and that, I mean, over time I can see, let's say, based on your watching pattern, the story changes. So you will watch a different story, or the same movie, you will have a different ending than my ending. And that again is not shot by actors. It is actually the AI generating these two different endings based on our own preferences. So that is happening. But imagine a world, I mean, you must have seen Neuralink project, which Elon Musk is kind of, imagine, and that's where he's working on the input side of it. So where while you're watching the video, it kind of takes your input, and based on your emotions at that point of time, it takes the story to a different level. So, and this, I think, will happen in the next 10 to 20 years. I mean, I mean, you can see that happening. So it's not even like a distant vision.
Yes. Today there's something more. I mean, even if we just take sports, for instance. One of our professors works, when the game is, it was built for badminton, but the same thing can be extended for other sports as well. As the game is happening, it analyzes the game and can get all kinds of visual analytics automatically. Like something as simple as heat map, like where the strokes were played and where all the shuttlecock go, and like where the points won, points lost, and just that will automatically generate, because that's not a big deal. It can identify different kinds of strokes. It can identify types of strokes where points were won, points were lost.
Correct.
It can all kinds of insights. Just typically, like say a good coach or somebody else in the game can, at the end of the game, can tell, look, your front
forehand is
like your forehand was bad today, like your at net play was not great. This algorithm can automatically generate all those and also create a visual model. So we didn't expect it to be used for broadcast. It was used by Star Sports for the Premier Badminton League. We didn't, when this was being built, we never realized broadcast use case. We thought it's meant for players and coaches.
Correct.
They saw a broadcast use case. They liked it. They used it in PBR for many of the.
Yeah, I think even broadcasting, I mean, a thing that you can imagine in broadcasting is, I mean, today there are so many camera angles, there are so many analytics that is done, and then I mean, a person sitting there decides that, okay, at this point of time, this will go up. This point of time, this will go up. And that's primarily because of the bandwidth constraint, right? I mean, you have maximum 2 Mbps, 5 Mbps, 10 Mbps connections today. And imagine when that will become 100 Mbps with 5G. So you can decide which view you want to view. So everything will be available to you. And of course, one will be like this curated view for decision fatigue. So I don't want to take that decision, you take it for me. But then, I mean, once that comes into play, imagine there will be different people who will use the same piece, and then it will be almost like YouTube creators, right? I mean, people will have commentaries on that, and then I will probably subscribe to a particular person because I like his style of commentary better than someone else's. So democratization of that entire data itself has so many use cases and the potential. In fact, I mean, the potential to make money, and those are careers that people have not even thought of today. So
one, again, same Star Sports was interested, but they didn't take it up. When they heard about this 360-degree camera, they were very interested in putting this camera in one of the box seats.
Okay.
Where all the popular actors and sports people are all who's watching a big game. They were going to put this camera. Now you control who I want to see. I can see the game. I can turn and see Shah Rukh Khan here. I can turn back and see somebody else. It's a 360 camera that you get it onto your phone, and you can see. I mean, you feel as though you're in the stadium.
Yeah. In that setup,
actually placed on a seat.
Correct.
In some of these premium seats. There was another use case that came up recently. We were working with Amsterdam Innovation Arena for something else, smart cities. So they were talking about a use case where you can order a drone to come and take a picture of you.
Okay.
You're watching the game. So you can order, and then the drone will come to you, take a picture, and post it on social media. From the stadium's handles.
Correct.
Well, you pay for it. It was a way to make money.
Yeah. But it's a very interesting use case. Yeah. I mean, yeah.
I'm sorry, I was going to say, at some level, it's not very, very high tech even.
Exactly.
I'm ordering from my phone. My location is exactly known.
Correct.
So it can find its way to the exact location. Doesn't need too much of image processing. Nothing.
Correct. Yeah.
10 feet away and take a picture.
drone technology is already there. That stabilization algorithms are already there. It can take videos. I mean, it's a very simple use case. So it's not even that complex. It's a great way to monetize, because again, the reason why you go to a stadium is because of the experience that you want to feel, right? And otherwise you would sit at home and watch it in TV, and that's a better experience in some ways. But I mean, you want to be in that crowd. You want to have that experience, and I think this kind of fits in. And you won't mind spending 500 rupees, 1,000 rupees. Because I mean, you are coming there for the experience. You might as well spend a few pennies more. So yeah, I mean that's a great commercial way as well.
True. So
but that also, I mean, your first point about 360-degree camera also brings in a very this thing about I mean, you're always being watched. So that is again one ethical dilemma that people will be in.
Yeah, that's a scary thing at some level, but but then if they've gone to a stadium, yes, they're likely, I mean, they're on camera anyway. Anybody that goes to a stadium,
that's true.
To that extent, probably okay. But you're right. I mean, there are these other questions that come up.
Yeah.
I mean, is it okay? And literally anybody can now zoom in, because this is a 360 camera where you can navigate you can't navigate the angle, position of the camera, but everything else you have control.
Yeah.
I can zoom in. Not only which angle I'm looking at, but I also can zoom in, zoom out.
Zoom in, zoom out.
And so that is, you're right. It's a little bit scary, but.
And these kind of ethical questions are also coming up in AI, ML, all of these things also. I mean, of course, right now we are not at that stage, but when we get there, I mean, everybody knows about it, right? I mean, what if the AI itself becomes superhuman? All of those, and what if it falls? I mean, forget that. What if it falls into the hands of someone, a bad actor? Within the state. So that's again, and the general consensus within the AI. I mean, there are two models to solve it. One, either centralize it and only a few people have access to the AI systems, or you democratize it and everyone has access. And I think within the AI system, everybody is agreeing to the point that we have to democratize it. We can't maintain it in one place, because then again, dictatorship and only some people will have the power and all of those things will come up. So it's better to democratize it. But with democratization comes the challenge of managing who that technology goes to, right? I mean, you can't control that. So even bad actors will have access to the same technology. So how do you manage that, especially when it becomes all powerful? So yeah, I mean, those are
still
very important questions.
You even begin to understand what the problem is.
Correct.
All these privacy issues, the AI training biases, data biases, and all that.
Yeah.
Just beginning to understand. I don't think it's even fully understood yet. And
Absolutely.
then we're phase of addressing and solving it. So Vinny, thank you so much. We went past time, but there's a fantastic conversation. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
I think it hopefully gives all our audiences, the startups and others that have watched today, and this gets recorded, it goes up on our YouTube channel as well.
Sure.
So it just gives a glimpse into the whole media tech space. Fantastic discussion. So Vinny, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Ramesh. I just wanted to conclude on one point that I had in mind. I think there are three main, I mean, the gist of the conversation today is, I think there are three main technology innovations that are happening today. And it's I think anyone who is an entrepreneur, who is looking to, who is looking at the future and deciding about the future in terms of where should I be and what technology should I work on. I think there are three main ones: AI, blockchain, and AR/VR. I think these are three in the next 10 years. It's the internet of tomorrow. So anybody, I think people should move on to that. I think that's the gist of the entire conversation that we have had today.
I think so too. Yes. And then and I would add to that a little bit more about the whole immersive models. I think it's an extension of AR/VR. But interesting immersive models, whether it is in storytelling or in other forms of content, sports, anywhere. I think that's some place where I'm sure we will see some very, very interesting innovations in the coming years.
Absolutely. So, thank you so much, Ramesh. Thank you for inviting me. It was a great. I think it felt more like a conversation more than I was a little nervous initially, but I mean, it was interesting.
So we keep it this way. I'm definitely call it. It's a fire up series. It's just a conversation.
Sure.
So a lot of things come out just in the conversation. So we keep it as a conversation. So thank you so much for joining us.